The bridge lights flickered as Captain Zorlan Kether's eyes darted across the data stream, his pulse quickening. The atmosphere in the warship's command center was dense, every breath thick with tension. Cold steel walls lined the room, and the faint electric crackle from the laser plasma displays was the only sound. Despite the eerie quiet, the energy was palpable, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. "Captain!" The voice of Lieutenant Valera came through the comms, sharp, urgent. "You need to see this." Zorlan's fingers tightened around the armrests of his chair, his knuckles whitening. He had seen enough anomalies in his years of service to be skeptical, but there was something about the way Valera's voice trembled, just the faintest hint of disbelief, that caught his attention. He pushed away from his desk and strode to the display station, the soles of his boots clicking sharply on the metal floor. The heads-up display flickered to life before him, and there it was, an ancient yet chillingly clear message. The language was a familiar relic, an outdated form of English, words that had long been abandoned across the galaxy in favor of universal translation protocols. The message was simple, but its weight was impossible to ignore. To any advanced civilization that might be listening, the message began, a quiet urgency in the words. "We have detected an extinction-level asteroid on a collision course with Earth. We do not ask for rescue, only for technical data on asteroid deflection. Time is critical." Zorlan's breath hitched in his chest. Earth, a primitive planet by galactic standards, was sending a cry for help, not for salvation, but for knowledge. A shiver crept up his spine as he processed the message. Their desperation was clear, but there was an unexpected resolve in the words. No begging, no pleas, just a demand for answers. He glanced at Valera, who stood at attention beside him, her face pale in the glow of the laser plasma display. "Run the diagnostics," Zorlan ordered, his voice steady, though inside his thoughts raced. The screen pulsed with data, and a series of technical graphs began to form. Zorlan's gaze flicked between the display and the reports coming in from across the ship. His fingers hovered over the interface, but he did not immediately touch the controls. His mind was racing through calculations. A distant voice came over the comms. "Captain, Director Valine is requesting an update." "Patch her through," Zorlan said, his eyes still glued to the heads-up display. The digital frame split, and the stern face of Director Valine appeared, her sharp features shadowed by the dim lighting of her office. "Report, Captain," she demanded, her tone icy. "There's a signal coming from Earth." "A distress call," Zorlan said, his voice low. "They're asking for asteroid deflection data. No, not just asking, demanding. They're taking action. This isn't the usual primitive plea for salvation." Director Valine's brow furrowed. "Earth? A Level 1 civilization?" "Yes, but—" Zorlan cut himself off, unsure of how to proceed. "Their data seems accurate, not just crude estimates. They've already started building something. I think they're preparing for a deflection." "Impossible," Valine replied sharply. "Earth can barely sustain their own technological advancements. There's no way they could pull off something like this. Are you certain?" Zorlan's eyes narrowed, his fingers twitching over the control panel. He could feel the weight of the question pressing down on him, but his instincts told him something was off. Something in the data felt almost too clean. "I'll send you the diagnostics, but this isn't just a random plea. They're already working on a plan." There was a brief silence on the other end of the transmission. Valine's expression hardened. "This could be an elaborate trap. You are to stand down. We will handle the situation when—" "No," Zorlan interrupted, his voice firm, rising above the static. "I need to see this for myself. There's something different about this. I'm going to Earth. Prepare a ship for immediate departure." Valine's lips pressed together in a thin line. "You have your orders, Captain." "I don't take orders when lives are at stake," Zorlan shot back, his eyes burning with resolve. "I'll update you when I have something concrete." The connection ended abruptly, but Zorlan didn't flinch. He turned back to the laser plasma display, his mind already on the calculations. There was something about this mission that tugged at him, a deeper current running beneath the surface, pulling him toward Earth. His instincts had never been wrong before. As he began inputting the coordinates for the jump, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "You're going to tell them, right?" Valera's voice was softer now, hesitant. Zorlan glanced over his shoulder. "Tell them what?" "Tell them what you're seeing," Valera said, stepping closer. "Because whatever's happening on Earth, it's beyond what we expected. It's not just a defense maneuver. It's something else. They're adapting, and quickly." Zorlan paused for a moment, considering her words. Earth's desperation was clear, but it wasn't just the asteroid that had drawn his attention. It was the way they were responding to it, efficiently, even methodically. Their ability to adapt to a threat that seemed insurmountable told him more about humanity than any initial report could. "They're not asking for a miracle," he murmured. "They're asking for knowledge so they can save themselves. This is different." Valera hesitated. "Do you think they can do it?" Zorlan gave her a long, searching look. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." He pressed the final command into the interface, the ship's engines humming to life as the first jump sequence initiated. The crew around him moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their place, each knowing the gravity of what they were about to face. But Zorlan's mind was far from the ship's engines and crew. It was focused solely on the message that had come from Earth. As the ship slipped into faster-than-light travel, Zorlan leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the glowing display in front of him. There was more to this SOS than anyone realized, and he was going to uncover it, no matter the cost. The sound of the jump resonated through the hull, and in the silence that followed, Zorlan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the unknown press down on him. This wasn't just a mission to save Earth. This was the beginning of something bigger, and Zorlan wasn't sure if they were ready for what would come next. The jump sequence pulled Zorlan's body against the seat as the ship tore through the void. Stars bled into streaks of light, warping around the edges of the hull as the engine's pulse surged, and for a moment, all he could hear was the rapid beat of his own heart. His fingers drummed against the armrest, the slight vibration grounding him in the reality of what lay ahead. Through the heads-up display, Earth's orbit appeared before him, sharp and immediate as the ship's systems began the slow process of deceleration. The laser plasma displays flickered as calculations and orbital maps materialized. Zorlan's eyes scanned each incoming detail, absorbing the data with the focus of a man who had spent his life in the heart of interstellar conflict. As the ship settled into its orbit around Earth, a striking contrast gripped him. The planet was a patchwork quilt of humanity's frantic efforts, sprawling industrial zones and bustling spaceports, all caught under the shadow of a growing extinction event. The vastness of space beyond Earth was a silent witness to their struggle. In the span of millennia, no civilization had ever faced such a challenge, and yet here Earth was, preparing for war not with foreign enemies but with the very rocks of the cosmos. Zorlan stood and paced the bridge, his boots clicking with authority. Valera stood nearby, her eyes fixed on the readouts, her face drawn tight with concentration. The muted glow from the laser plasma displays illuminated her sharp features as she glanced at him, her gaze uncertain but firm. "Captain," Valera began, voice measured but laced with an undertone of concern, "you sure this is a good idea? We're here right on their doorstep. If the Council gets wind of us taking action before authorization—" "I'll deal with that later," Zorlan cut her off, his voice firm. "Right now, we have a planet to save." Valera hesitated, the weight of his words settling between them. She had seen Zorlan act with swift decisiveness before, but this was different. Earth wasn't just facing the consequences of a galactic threat. They were staring down the barrel of extinction, and doing so with a quiet, resolute defiance. It was this that unnerved her most, the quiet calm that permeated their response. "We have to go in," she said, her tone softening. "Their systems aren't enough for what's coming." Zorlan's gaze hardened as he leaned toward the console, his finger gliding across the interface. He pulled up the satellite feeds again, hundreds of them, each one showing different angles of Earth's defenses. Mass drivers were being constructed in orbit, crude but functional, like teeth in the jaws of an animal preparing to bite. "I've been analyzing their builds," Zorlan muttered, more to himself than to Valera. They're not just reacting to the threat, they're preemptively setting up. No hesitation, no panic. They're preparing for battle. But it's not just the mass drivers. Look at this. He flicked his wrist and the display changed, revealing blueprints of Earth's subterranean labs, underground complexes abuzz with activity. Teams from all over the world, scientists, engineers, and soldiers, working in unison, connected by something greater than just necessity. This wasn't the frantic chaos he'd expected to see in the face of certain annihilation. Instead, there was method in their madness. Earth's collaboration is unexpected, Zorlan said, leaning back and letting the cold silence of space press against the hull. Their governments, their corporations, they're cooperating on a scale I've never seen from a species so divided. Valera's lips parted in a quiet breath. It's as if they know they have no other choice, she said, the thought dawning on her. They don't have a choice, Zorlan replied sharply. That's the difference. They aren't asking for salvation. They're demanding the tools to solve their problem themselves. They don't even care if they're going to fail. They just need to try. Before Valera could respond, a new alarm rang out, interrupting the quiet tension in the command center. Zorlan's fingers moved instinctively to the control panel, a flurry of commands as his mind processed the incoming data. The image on the laser plasma display shifted, showing several ships entering Earth's atmosphere. What now? Valera asked, her voice tight. They're here, Zorlan said, eyes narrowing as he studied the new ships. More unidentified craft entering the system, and they're not ours. The display blinked, revealing a sleek, sharp-edged ship on a direct course for Earth. The vessel was smaller but more agile than anything Earth had yet to produce. It was an alien design, one he recognized, though he couldn't immediately place it. Zorlan's instincts, honed by decades of experience, told him this wasn't just some rogue ship. This was an invasion. The enemy had arrived. Are they friendly? Valera asked, though the question was more rhetorical than hopeful. No, Zorlan replied with certainty. And they know what Earth is trying to do. They're not going to let that happen. His voice dropped to a low growl. We can't let them stop us. The ship's interior shook slightly, the warning lights flickering on the edges of the display as the incoming vessels made their move. Zorlan's heart raced, the energy in the command center shifting as if they were all drawn into the same orbit, each of them tethered by the same urgency, the same sense of looming threat. Launch interception drones, Zorlan barked, his orders quick and deliberate. The crew responded with precision, but their motions were filled with the tense energy of those who knew that, just beyond the ship's protective hull, battle was imminent. We need a defensive perimeter around Earth, now. His words carried the weight of a leader who had no time to second-guess. The enemy was already within range, and the clock was ticking. Valera's voice trembled slightly as she relayed the orders. All drones launched, awaiting your command. Zorlan's eyes locked onto the laser plasma display, studying the incoming enemy ships. They were faster than anything Earth had, and more maneuverable too. A single misstep, and the planet would be left exposed. Earth's fragile defenses were all they had left. Keep them off Earth, Zorlan said, his voice colder now, sharper. Every ship that passes the defense line gets one shot. Do not hesitate. Valera nodded, stepping back, already relaying the orders. Zorlan felt the weight of each decision like a stone around his neck, but there was no other option. He had to lead, and the fate of an entire planet rested in his hands. If Earth's defenses failed, everything they had worked for would be lost, not just for Earth, but for the galaxy at large. He exhaled, the air thick in his lungs as the ship's alarms blared again, this time signaling the imminent clash. The distant rumble of a battle began to stir in his chest, and he steeled himself for what was to come. He wasn't here to watch history unfold. He was here to write it. His thoughts turned briefly to the Earthlings, those who had chosen to face certain death, not with fear, but with resolve. The sound of their defiance echoed in his mind, sharp and unrelenting. Prepare for impact, Zorlan whispered under his breath, the weight of the moment sinking in. As the first alien ship broke through the atmosphere and the sky erupted with fire, Zorlan's command center braced itself for a battle that would test everything humanity, and his own forces, had ever believed about survival. The cold, metallic tang of the ship's interior settled in Zorlan's lungs as he paced back and forth. His boots clicked sharply against the polished floor, the sound crisp in the quiet chaos of the command center. Outside, Earth's sprawling cities glistened with an unnatural urgency, the artificial lights glowing bright against the dark expanse of space. It wasn't just the asteroid that kept him on edge. It was the growing tension in the air, like a storm about to break. "Status report," Zorlan barked, his voice low but firm. "Defense perimeter set." "Drones are in position," Valera replied, her voice steady despite the evident strain. Her fingers danced across the laser plasma display, the glow casting deep shadows across her face. The cool blue light flickered in her eyes as data poured in from every corner of Earth's orbit. Zorlan nodded, but his thoughts were far from the immediate task at hand. He had studied the enemy's movements, and still, there was something about their behavior that gnawed at him. The ships that had arrived on Earth's doorstep weren't acting like typical invaders. They didn't have the usual aggressive flair. They moved with purpose, precise, but there was something in their rhythm, something in the way they circled Earth's defenses. They weren't just attacking, they were studying. He clenched his fists, the nerve in his jaw tightening. Something didn't feel right. And then, the first sharp alert rang through the ship. A burst of static filled the comms, followed by a single line of garbled data. "We've intercepted their signal," Valera said, turning her attention to the screen, her fingers flying across the controls. "They're trying to communicate." Zorlan's gaze snapped to the heads-up display. Another anomaly. The transmission wasn't just a warning. It was a message, a language that wasn't their own. The alien ships weren't launching a full-scale assault. Instead, they were negotiating. "Get the encryption team on this," Zorlan ordered. "Now!" As the ship's sensors hummed and the team scrambled to decode the message, the air in the command center seemed to thicken, every second stretching with a sense of growing unease. Zorlan's mind raced through the possibilities. Negotiation. Was this a trick? Were they testing Earth's response? Or worse, was this a trap set for him, to lure him in with false hopes? He turned his back on the display, his eyes scanning the room. Valera was tense, but focused. The others around him were a mix of unease and determination, each waiting for the next step, their fingers hovering over their respective controls. The encryption team's response crackled through the comms. "Captain, it's not just any message," the officer said. "This isn't a standard alien transmission. It's layered with older data, encrypted on multiple levels. We're looking at something ancient." Zorlan's heart skipped a beat. Ancient? Not like the technology we've seen before. This goes back centuries. Maybe longer, the officer continued. "It's almost as if this message was sent to Earth before the asteroid was even detected. As if someone knew this was going to happen." Zorlan's mind spun. A warning? A prophecy? Or something else entirely? Whatever it was, it didn't fit into the neat little box he'd expected. He ran a hand over his face, frustration gnawing at him. "Report back when you have the translation," he said, his voice low, laced with urgency. "We can't afford to waste time on this." But just as the words left his mouth, the heads-up display flickered, and the drone feed began to glitch. The defensive perimeter, which had been holding steady, began to falter. The drones were out of sync, their movements jerky and erratic. "Not again," Valera muttered, her fingers flying over the console as she tried to regain control. The light from the display reflected off her furrowed brow, her lips pressed into a thin line. "They've already hacked into our systems." Zorlan's blood ran cold. "How?" "Their ships are more advanced than we thought," Valera replied, her tone steady but filled with the weight of realization. "They're not just invaders, they're strategists. They're using our own systems against us." Before Zorlan could respond, a loud crash reverberated through the ship. The walls shuddered, and the floor tilted slightly beneath their feet. A sharp, burning scent filled the air as the ship's hull groaned under pressure. The comms blared again, this time with an urgent, frantic voice. "Captain, We've lost power to the lower decks. The shields are down. Damn it! Zorlan hissed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Deploy backup generators. Get those shields up now. But even as the command left his lips, the gravity of the situation settled around him like a vice. The enemy was no longer just outside. They were inside, manipulating everything from the inside out. Move! Zorlan shouted. The crew sprang into action, scrambling to stabilize the ship. But the alien ships, like sharks circling their prey, grew closer, their movements deliberate and ominous. Zorlan slammed his fist onto the control panel. The image of Earth's trembling surface filled the heads-up display. Tiny flashes from explosions on the planet's surface, a sign of the ground defense systems beginning to crumble. Humanity's last hope was buckling under the pressure. The enemy fleet remained suspended, watching. It was as if they were letting Earth exhaust itself, their ships hovering just outside the atmosphere, biding their time. Zorlan's thoughts were a whirlpool, a dizzying storm of tactics and strategies. This wasn't a battle for survival. It was something deeper, a test, a probe. They had underestimated Earth, yes, but Earth had underestimated the enemy in turn. These invaders weren't just here to conquer. They were here to gauge humanity's true strength, to break it, slowly, piece by piece. We need to act fast, Zorlan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His gaze locked onto the flickering data streams, his mind working through the problem like a chess master calculating his next move. The alien ships weren't the only threat. The asteroid was still looming, a dark shadow waiting to strike, and somehow these invaders were linked to it. A sudden thought struck him like a bolt of lightning, and he turned sharply to Valera. What if they're here for the asteroid? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable, but in her eyes Zorlan saw the flicker of the same realization that had struck him. They had underestimated the enemy, but worse, the enemy had known more than they had. As the ship veered toward its next move, Zorlan knew one thing for certain. The war had just begun, and the real battle wasn't against the invaders, it was against time itself. The lights flickered once more as the countdown to disaster began. Zorlan's mind raced, but deep down he felt a cold, creeping fear take root. There was no escape, not from the asteroid, not from the invaders. The question wasn't whether humanity could survive, but whether they would have the strength to confront the truth of what lay ahead. And Zorlan had no answers, not yet. But the clock was ticking. Zorlan's fingers trembled against the smooth surface of the control panel, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a storm cloud, on the verge of breaking. The air in the command center felt thicker, filled with a sense of urgency that no amount of training could prepare him for. Outside the reinforced windows, Earth's surface flickered with the dance of distant explosions, the planet itself straining under the pressure of the invasion and the approaching asteroid. The laser plasma displays blinked with incoming data, streaks of light and shadow colliding in patterns that spoke of mounting chaos. "Captain, we've lost another satellite." Valera's voice sliced through the tension, flat but edged with disbelief. "The invaders are systematically disabling our systems from orbit." Zorlan's gaze snapped to the display, his jaw tightening. "Are we still in control of the drones?" "For now," Valera replied, her fingers flicking across the controls, her gaze unwavering. "But not for long. They're learning our systems faster than we can update them." The words hung in the air, a truth they all knew too well. They were fighting a losing battle, but there was no retreat, no safe haven. Every piece of their fleet was being worn down piece by piece, as if the invaders were systematically testing humanity's defenses, finding the weak points, and exploiting them with terrifying efficiency. The drones, humanity's last line of defense, were slowly losing their precision, malfunctioning as the alien ships sent pulses of energy that scrambled their systems. "We can't let this continue," Zorlan muttered, his eyes narrowing. "We're running out of time." "Then we act now," Valera snapped back, her hands flying over the console. "Earth's defenses are nearly crippled. We need to get the shield generators back online, if we're to stand any chance at holding them off." Zorlan's brow furrowed. "And how do you propose we do that, with our systems compromised?" She didn't answer immediately, her fingers still dancing across the display. Zorlan could see the strain in her eyes, the weight of leadership, the endless decisions they had to make with the ticking clock against them. "We find a way," Valera said at last, her voice low but fierce. A sudden, sharp noise cracked through the stillness, the high-pitched screech of an incoming transmission. Zorlan's head snapped up. The laser plasma display flared as the transmission signal began to decode. It was alien in nature, layered in such a way that it felt like a warning. This time, there was no confusion in the message, no hidden intent. "They're communicating," Zorlan said, almost to himself as the translated text began to appear across the screen. "Not with Earth, but with us." Valera looked up sharply. "What do they want?" Zorlan's jaw clenched. The message was simple, yet its weight was undeniable. "It's not a request. It's a challenge." A long pause stretched between them, the air growing even heavier with each passing second. "Why would they challenge us?" Valera asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What could they gain?" "I don't know," Zorlan said, his voice colder now, tinged with uncertainty. "But whatever it is, they're not just here to conquer. They're probing us, testing our resolve." Another alert flashed across the screen, pulling them both back into the present. A series of explosive impacts rippled through the outer defenses. Earth's sky was now alive with fire, an inferno of missile strikes and orbital debris. The alien ships, now clearly visible on the heads-up display, maintained their orbit like a web slowly tightening around the planet. Their movements were calculated, too deliberate to be mere conquest. "They're preparing something," Zorlan muttered, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck rise. "They're waiting for something to break." Valera stepped closer, her voice urgent. "We can't hold out forever, Captain. The asteroid's impact is still looming. If we don't stop the invaders now, it'll be too late for both Earth and us." Zorlan turned, meeting her gaze, his face hardening. "We'll fight until the last," he said, his voice firm. "But I need to know everything about those alien ships. We're dealing with something different here." Valera nodded, and the laser plasma display flickered to life, presenting more detailed information on the alien ships. Zorlan studied the images, his mind racing through the data. The ships were sleek, angular in design. Unlike anything Earth or even his own fleet had encountered, they seemed to absorb light, their edges jagged but flowing, like an organic extension of the dark space around them. The technology was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Alien, yes, but eerily familiar. Something about it gnawed at him, a sensation he couldn't quite shake. "They've adapted faster than we anticipated," Valera observed, her eyes scanning the data. "And they're not just using our systems against us. They've integrated with them. Their ships are inside our defenses," Zorlan finished her thought, his voice hardening. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and disbelief creeping into his chest. "They've learned our systems so quickly that they've almost turned our technology into their own." "We need to take them down now," Valera urged, "or we won't have a chance against the asteroid or them." Zorlan clenched his fists. "I won't let Earth fall." The ship rumbled beneath his feet again, a sharp tremor that sent a chill up his spine. Zorlan's eyes snapped to the heads-up display, and the world outside the ship blurred as a new wave of enemy ships appeared in the distance, moving with even greater speed and coordination. "We've underestimated them," Zorlan said, his voice laced with regret. "They're not just here to stop Earth. They want to break us, to tear apart the fabric of everything we've fought for." Valera's eyes flicked over to the new incoming data. "Captain, what are you suggesting?" Zorlan hesitated. For the first time in a long while, he didn't know what to do. The invaders weren't just attacking. They were toying with them, studying them, drawing out humanity's weakness, and feeding on it like predators circling their prey. "We need to hit them where it hurts," he said finally, his voice low but steady. "We need to disrupt their communication, break their control over our systems, and hit them hard before they adapt again." Valera nodded, her expression firm. "I'll get the team started." "Do it fast," Zorlan urged, his gaze still fixed on the flickering display. before they learn everything about us." As the crew moved quickly to execute his orders, Zorlan stood frozen, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on him. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a race against time, against an enemy that was learning faster than they could adapt. Outside the ship, Earth's cities burned, and the distant hum of alien ships filled the cold silence of space. In that moment, Zorlan knew one thing for sure: nothing was as it seemed, and he didn't know if humanity was ready for the true cost of survival. The ship groaned as it lurched forward, the vibrations coursing through Zorlan's body, sharp and persistent. He gripped the edge of the console, eyes locked on the heads-up display that flickered and buzzed with a relentless cascade of incoming data. Earth's surface was alive with chaotic bursts of light, distant explosions, missile launches, desperate, sporadic attempts to push back the enemy's relentless assault. Every tremor that rattled the ship felt like a countdown, a reminder that they were on borrowed time. "Captain, incoming wave!" Valera's voice sliced through the static, cold and calculated. "The enemy's adapting faster than expected. They've modified their strategy. They're coordinating a multi-pronged assault on our drone defenses." Zorlan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the screen again, his eyes tracing the movement of the alien ships. They were now aligned, a dangerous formation that shifted and reformed with each passing moment. The invaders had learned to anticipate Earth's defensive movements, counteracting every maneuver with unnerving efficiency. "They're reading us like an open book," Zorlan muttered, his voice thick with frustration. "Valera, deploy countermeasures. We can't give them any more openings." She didn't hesitate, her fingers flying across the console. But even as she worked, Zorlan could feel the weight of their predicament pressing in on him. Earth's fragile defense systems were on the brink of collapse. The asteroid was still barreling toward them, and now the invaders were getting too close, too organized. The sharp, artificial light of the laser plasma displays cast long shadows across Valera's face as she worked, sweat beading on her forehead. "What are they waiting for?" Valera whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. "Why aren't they finishing this?" Zorlan's gaze hardened. He had no answer for her. All he knew was that the alien fleet wasn't acting like any enemy he had ever encountered. They were strategic, methodical, almost surgical in their precision. Each move they made was a calculated response to Earth's attempts at resistance. "Captain," the communications officer called out from the corner, his voice strained, "we've intercepted another transmission. It's not from the invaders. It's from Earth. Another message." Zorlan snapped his attention to the officer, his mind racing. "Patch it through." The officer nodded, quickly rerouting the transmission. The laser plasma display hummed to life with a new signal. The message was short, fragmented, but the urgency was clear. Zorlan leaned closer, listening intently. "To the fleet, time is running out. We need all hands on deck. The asteroid's trajectory is shifting. Adjustments must be made, or Earth will be lost." The words sent a cold chill through Zorlan's veins. Humanity wasn't just fighting the invaders anymore. They were fighting a clock that was ticking far too fast. Earth's leaders had sent out the final call, a plea for help, not just from the alien threat, but from the looming cataclysm that would wipe out everything. Zorlan's mind raced, connecting the dots. "It's all connected," he murmured to himself. The invaders, the asteroid, they weren't separate threats. They were part of a single destructive force. Someone, or something, had orchestrated this from the shadows. And now humanity was caught in the crossfire. "What's the next move, Captain?" Valera's voice was steady, but there was a crack of worry hidden in it. Zorlan exhaled sharply, eyes flicking from the alien formations to the damage reports flashing across the heads-up display. "We fight," he said, his voice low and resolute. "But we're not just holding the line anymore. We have to take the fight to them." The words left his mouth before he could fully process them. The ship's alarms blared, and Zorlan's thoughts snapped back into focus. He turned to Valera. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. All drone units. Fire on my mark." But before Valera could respond, the ship shuddered violently, and the lights flickered ominously. Zorlan's heart skipped a beat. The walls groaned, a sound that rattled him to his core. The entire ship was shaking. A new alert popped up on the heads-up display. A warning. "Direct hit to the port side," the officer said, his voice trembling. "Hull breach detected." The command center erupted into chaos, but Zorlan's voice cut through the panic. "Seal off all compartments. Get the damage control team on it, now!" The crew scrambled into action, the steady thrum of feet pounding the floor reverberating in the tense silence that followed the order. Zorlan's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The alien ships had broken their pattern. This was no longer just an invasion. They were making a direct push for the heart of humanity's defenses. "Status of the asteroid?" Zorlan barked. The communications officer's face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. "The asteroid's trajectory. It's shifting faster now. We've lost the data link to the surface. They're not just firing on us. They're attacking Earth's ground control, too." Zorlan clenched his fists, fury flooding his veins. The invaders weren't just here to defeat them. They were trying to erase everything. Earth's last hope was slipping through their fingers, and Zorlan was powerless to stop it. "Can we re-establish communication with Earth?" he demanded, his voice tight. "We're working on it," the officer replied. "But the jamming from the invaders is too strong." Zorlan turned away from the chaos, his mind already forming a new strategy. They had one chance to hit back, to take the fight directly to the heart of the alien fleet. If they failed here, Earth would fall, and Zorlan refused to let that happen. "Listen up!" Zorlan's voice boomed through the command center, commanding immediate attention. "We're going to send a coordinated strike against their command vessel. We'll punch a hole through their lines and make a run for it. We get through. We hold them off. We don't—" He paused, the weight of the words sinking in. "We don't leave Earth behind." Valera, her face ashen but determined, nodded sharply. "Understood." The crew moved with a newfound sense of purpose, even as the reality of their situation crashed over them. Earth was on the brink, and this strike was all they had left. Zorlan's eyes flicked over the display once more. He could see the alien ships lining up, their movements deliberate. They were making their move, closing in on Earth's vulnerable heart. Zorlan could feel the cold pressure in his chest, the breath in his lungs tight as he stared down the alien fleet. It was a moment of reckoning, one that would determine whether humanity would survive. His hands tightened around the control panel, and he gave the order. "Launch the strike." The ship's systems roared to life, and Zorlan's heart raced as the battle for Earth reached its boiling point. There was no turning back now. The countdown had begun, and the future of an entire planet hung in the balance. Would they succeed, or would humanity's final stand become their epitaph? Zorlan didn't know. All he knew was that this was the turning point, the moment everything would either break or bend. Zorlan's breath came in short, controlled bursts as the countdown ticked relentlessly towards zero. The cold metal of the control panel was biting under his fingers, but his grip tightened, steady. There was no turning back now. The strike against the alien command vessel was underway, but the battle had only just begun. He could feel the tension in his bones like the calm before the storm, the last breath before the plunge. His mind sharpened, every muscle on edge. The ship's corridors were alive with motion, boots pounding, orders shouted, but in the control center, time seemed to slow. "Captain," Valera's voice sliced through the thick silence, her words sharp with urgency. "The enemy's coordinating a full-scale counterattack. They're converging on our strike force." Zorlan's eyes snapped to the laser plasma display as the data poured in, each number more unsettling than the last. Alien ships flanked the advancing Earth fleet, their angular forms darting in perfect sync, shifting and reconfiguring with an intelligence that sent a cold ripple through him. Their movements were more than deliberate. They were strategic. Each shift, each turn, was a calculated response to the Earth fleet's attack. "Damn it," Zorlan muttered under his breath, the words laced with frustration. "They're anticipating our every move." He didn't need to glance at Valera to know her thoughts were aligning with his own. The enemy wasn't just fighting for victory. They were playing a game of psychological warfare, wearing down Earth's defenses and patience, probing for weaknesses, pushing them toward a breaking point. "Captain, their formation is solidifying." Valera warned, her fingers brushing across the interface with quick precision. "They've locked us into a trap. Our strike force is exposed. They're going to pick us off one by one." Zorlan's eyes narrowed as he studied the heads-up display. The enemy ships, now in a tight V-shaped formation, were circling their target with deadly precision. Earth's forces were still charging forward, unaware of how the aliens had positioned themselves, creating an inescapable perimeter. Zorlan's mind raced through the strategy he'd laid out. He had no choice but to improvise, to act before it was too late. "Initiate evasive maneuvers," Zorlan barked, his voice low but firm. "We won't engage head-on. Lead them into the blind spot." Valera's eyes widened as she processed the order. "That's risky. If they catch on to our shift, we'll be exposed even more." "I know," Zorlan said, his gaze steely. "But we have no choice. We move fast, or they'll wipe us out." The ship jolted as the engines flared to life, responding to Zorlan's command. The deck shuddered under the intensity, the sudden rush of movement reverberating through Zorlan's chest. The cold air in the command center grew heavier as the ship veered off its course, pitching sharply toward the side. Zorlan watched the heads-up display where Earth's fleet shifted along with them, the strike force moving into position. But the alien ships were fast. Too fast. Zorlan's stomach twisted as a new alert blared across the console. "They're onto us," Valera said, her voice tight with disbelief. "They've adapted. They're locking onto our blind spot." Zorlan's mind raced, calculating their options in an instant. There wasn't enough time to change course without risking total exposure. His heart pounded against his ribcage, his breath shallow, but his voice remained steady. "We fight. Prepare all weapons. Deploy countermeasures." "Captain," the communications officer's voice crackled through the comms, filled with static. "The asteroid's trajectory. Something's wrong. It's moving faster now. The calculations are off. The deflection plan might fail." Zorlan's blood ran cold. He had barely processed the words before his mind latched onto the one thing that could still be the tipping point. The asteroid. They had been distracted, too focused on the immediate threat in front of them. But that was their mistake. The asteroid wasn't just a ticking time bomb. It was the one weapon that could either save or annihilate them all. "We've been too slow," Zorlan said, his voice low with a mix of rage and clarity. "The asteroid's change in speed, it's not random. The invaders must have done something to alter its course." Valera's eyes widened. "You think they're manipulating it?" "I'm sure of it," Zorlan replied, the weight of the revelation crashing over him. "The invaders weren't just here to fight. They were here to control everything. The asteroid was their ultimate weapon, and they had turned it against them." A sudden jolt rocked the ship again, followed by a deafening blast that echoed through the hull. The lights flickered, and the metal walls groaned in protest, as another barrage from the alien fleet slammed into their shields. "Shields are failing!" Valera called out, her voice tight. "We can't hold out much longer." Zorlan's thoughts raced faster than his hands could follow. The asteroid, the enemy, Earth's fragile defenses, it was all converging at once, a perfect storm. He could feel the ship's systems straining against the pressure, the crew moving with increasing urgency. But Zorlan's mind was no longer just focused on the battle at hand. His gaze shifted to the flashing warning that now dominated the laser plasma display. The asteroid was on the move, faster than expected, and Earth's chances of survival were rapidly dwindling. "We need to destroy the invaders' command vessel," Zorlan muttered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We stop them at the source." Valera's eyes locked onto his. "And if we fail?" Zorlan didn't flinch. "We don't fail." The atmosphere in the command center seemed to thicken with anticipation. Zorlan's every instinct screamed at him to act, to push forward, to take the risks, but a part of him, deep down, knew they were on the edge of the precipice. They were seconds from a full-blown disaster. The sound of the ship's engines revved up again, the command center filled with the intensity of their movement. Zorlan's pulse matched the rising tempo, his heart sinking with the rhythm of the impending battle. He could hear the sharp breath of every crew member around him, feel the tension vibrating through the metal, the world outside closing in on all sides. Get ready, Zorlan said, his voice low but filled with unwavering determination. This is it. We move now, or we lose Earth forever. He slammed his hand onto the console, triggering the launch sequence for the final offensive. The ship surged forward, a thunderous roar vibrating through its core. Zorlan's mind was a blur of calculations and instinct, his eyes locked on the alien fleet's command ship, now fully exposed. The alien forces were closing in, their ships surrounding Earth's fragile defenses. But this time, Zorlan was ready. This time, they weren't just running. They were fighting to the end. With everything at stake, Zorlan prepared himself for the final push, his fingers tightening over the controls as the battle's climax loomed ever closer. The air in the command center crackled with tension as Zorlan's hands gripped the control panel, fingers digging into the cold metal. The ship trembled beneath him, shuddering with every evasive maneuver. His breath came in steady bursts, but beneath the calm exterior, his mind was a whirlwind of calculations and contingency plans. The alien command vessel was within striking distance, but the cost of failure was far too great. Earth's defenses were crumbling, and the asteroid, now hurtling toward the planet at an ever-increasing speed, was a ticking clock they could no longer ignore. "Captain," Valera's voice cut through the hum of activity in the room, her tone sharp. "We've got one shot at this. The enemy fleet is closing in, and we're down to our last reserve shields. If we don't break their formation now, it's over." Zorlan's eyes flicked to the heads-up display, the swirling map of Earth's orbital defenses, and the alien fleet's movements. The alien ships, now forming a solid line, had synchronized their efforts, an intricate web of attack that was closing in on their position. But Zorlan wasn't one to back down. The stakes were too high, and there was still a sliver of hope. They had one shot to take down the alien command vessel, and it had to be perfect. His voice rang out, cutting through the rising tension. "Deploy all remaining drones, focus on their weak points, the gaps in their formation. We have to keep them occupied while we make our move." Valera's fingers danced across the console, a flurry of commands and calculations. "Acknowledge, Captain." "Sending them now." Zorlan's gaze locked onto the laser plasma display as the drones shot into the void. Each one, an extension of Earth's desperate resistance, zoomed toward the alien fleet, a small but crucial strike. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But humanity's strength lay in its ingenuity, its ability to turn the tide even when it seemed impossible. The ship rumbled again, this time more violently. Zorlan's hand tightened around the armrest, the metal cool and unforgiving beneath his fingers. "Report." "We're losing shields," came the terse reply from one of the officers. "But we've managed to breach a few of their ship's systems. The drones are working, but they're taking heavy damage." Zorlan's mind raced. They were fighting an uphill battle, but the drones had given them an opening. The alien vessels were responding, drawing attention away from the command ship. But they needed more than just a distraction. They needed to hit the heart of the invasion before it was too late. He looked to Valera, the tension in her eyes matching his own. "Valera, what's the status on the asteroid?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Valera's fingers hovered over the controls, but her gaze remained fixed on the screen. "The asteroid's velocity has increased by nearly 30%. At this rate, it will impact in just over 20 minutes. Our window is closing." Zorlan's stomach tightened. Time was running out. Everything hinged on this moment. But if they could disable the alien command vessel, they might just have a chance to stop the asteroid. He turned toward the tactical officer. "Prepare the main cannons. We're going in." Zorlan's voice was resolute, every word carrying the weight of their final effort. "We'll take them head on. Concentrate all firepower on their shield generators. Valera, when their shields drop, I want full missile deployment on their engines. We need them disabled now." "Understood," Valera replied, her eyes sharp, focused. "But we'll need to take some risks if we're going to break through." "I know," Zorlan muttered, "but there's no other choice." The laser plasma displays flickered as the coordinates for their attack flashed across the screen. Zorlan took a breath, his mind steady despite the chaos. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing on him. There was no room for error, no time for hesitation. The ship lurched forward as the engines flared to life, their power surging through the vessel. The heads-up display shifted, showing the alien command vessel in full view. It was a monolithic structure, sleek and jagged, its surface a series of shifting angles designed to absorb and redirect energy. But Zorlan knew it wasn't invincible. If they could break through the defenses, if they could land a direct hit, they might just have a chance to bring it down. "All weapons primed," the weapons officer called out. "We're locked on." Zorlan's breath caught in his throat as the ship roared forward. Every second counted. The alien fleet began to close in, but they were too late. The ship's cannons fired in quick succession, a barrage of searing light cutting through the blackness of space. The alien command vessel's shields flickered under the assault, but they held barely. Zorlan's pulse quickened. "Now, Valera!" he shouted. Valera's fingers moved faster than ever, her eyes flicking between the data streams. "Missiles launched, Captain. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The ship shook violently as the missiles made contact, a brilliant explosion blooming across the alien vessel's hull. The shockwave rocked their own ship, but the screens confirmed what they'd been hoping for. The enemy shields were down. A new wave of adrenaline surged through Zorlan's veins. "Direct hit," Valera reported, her voice steady but triumphant. "We've disabled their engines. They're drifting." Zorlan's eyes locked onto the alien vessel, now crippled and vulnerable. The final push was theirs for the taking. "Prepare boarding parties," Zorlan ordered, his voice ringing with authority. "We're going in." Valera nodded, her face a mask of resolve. "Acknowledged, Captain. All boarding teams are ready." As the ship closed in on the alien command vessel, Zorlan felt a wave of anticipation. They had done it. They had breached the defenses, and now they would face the heart of the invaders head-on. He could hear the distant rush of footsteps behind him as the boarding teams prepared for their assault. The crew had done its part. They had cleared the way. Now it was up to them to finish what they had started. "Boarding teams, go!" Zorlan said, his voice low and commanding. The doors to the ship's boarding pods opened with a soft hiss, and the teams moved with military precision, their steps light but purposeful. The tension in the room was palpable as Zorlan watched them depart, the final steps in a long battle. Each member of the crew, each officer and soldier, had a part to play in the coming storm. They would strike fast, strike hard, and they would not leave the alien command vessel until it was theirs. The ship's air seemed thick with the weight of what lay ahead, an uncertain future where victory was not guaranteed, but where the promise of survival burned bright in their chests. The moment was theirs, and as Zorlan stared at the flickering laser plasma display showing the alien vessel's disabled state, he knew one thing. This battle was far from over, but the war was theirs to win. In that moment, he could almost taste the victory. But first, they had to finish what they had started. The path ahead was clear. Take the alien command vessel and then turn their attention to the asteroid before it was too late. But the price of failure had never been so high. Zorlan took a deep breath, his voice resolute. "Let's finish this." Fomini. The sound of boots on the metal floor was the only thing Zorlan could hear as the countdown to the final assault began. The ship was now drifting close to the enemy command vessel, every weapon primed and ready, every crew member's heart beating in synchrony with the final strike. Their mission was simple: board the vessel, eliminate the enemy leadership, and take control. But Zorlan knew that nothing about this final push would be simple. The alien fleet was down, but the asteroid was still coming. And every second they delayed was another second the planet was hurtling toward annihilation. "All teams, brace for impact." Valera's voice came over the comms, her tone cold but commanding. The crew responded without hesitation, each person moving to their station with a single-minded focus. Zorlan could feel the weight of their collective will, the unspoken determination that now surged through their bones. Zorlan stood in the heart of the command center, eyes fixed on the laser plasma display in front of him. The alien command vessel was now just a few hundred meters away. It loomed in space like a monstrous shadow, its jagged hull scarred from their previous strikes. It was crippled, but still dangerous, still alive. the remnants of its fleet scattered behind it like dogs with no master. It would not be easy. "Captain," one of the officers spoke, breaking Zorlan's reverie, "we've confirmed that the alien leadership is still on board. If we move now, we can take them before they get their systems back online." Zorlan nodded, his mind sharp. The time to wait had passed. "Deploy all remaining forces," he ordered. "We don't give them a chance to regroup. Take no prisoners." Valera's eyes met his across the room, her face set in a mask of calm determination. But Zorlan could see the flicker of fear beneath the surface, an emotion none of them could afford to show. Not now. The air in the command center grew thick with tension as the crew prepared for the final battle. Zorlan's pulse quickened, but his mind stayed focused. His hands were steady on the control panel, his breath slow and measured. His voice carried firm and unwavering. "We're not just fighting for this ship. We're fighting for Earth, for every soul on that planet. We cannot fail." The doors to the boarding pods hissed open, and the sound of armed soldiers preparing to launch rippled through the ship. Zorlan watched them go, the last line of defense against the invaders. They moved quickly, purpose in their every step, knowing that this would be the moment that defined them, that defined humanity. The ship lurched forward as the boarding pods shot toward the alien vessel. Zorlan could feel the weight of it, the inevitable crash against the walls of destiny. His eyes flicked back to the laser plasma display. The asteroid's trajectory was still shifting. It was close now, too close, but they had one chance to stop it. They had to succeed, not just for themselves, but for every living thing that would perish if they failed. The bridge was silent, except for the low murmur of commands being passed from station to station. Zorlan's gaze flickered to Valera, her face grim as she monitored the tactical data. "Once we breach the command vessel, we'll disable their remaining defenses," she said, her voice low. "After that, we'll turn our attention to the asteroid. The moment we take control, we need to act fast." Zorlan nodded. The countdown was no longer theoretical. The asteroid was within reach. There was no more time to waste. "Let's do this," he said, the words a final rallying cry before the storm. Then everything happened at once. The first explosion rocked the ship as the boarding teams made their move, breaching the outer hull of the alien vessel. The air filled with the sound of weapons fire, the cries of soldiers pushing forward into the heart of the enemy's stronghold. Zorlan's heart pounded as he watched the live feeds on the laser plasma display. The invaders were fighting back, but they were outmatched now. Earth's finest had arrived, and there would be no mercy. "Captain," Valera called out, her voice tight with urgency. "The asteroid, it's closer. We have less than 15 minutes. If we don't stop it now, it's over." Zorlan's eyes burned with determination. "We will stop it. We're not just here to fight for Earth. We're here to show them who we are. We're not their pawns. We're humanity." His hands flew across the control panel, initiating the sequence to target the asteroid's trajectory. The alien leadership had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won. They thought they had the upper hand. But they hadn't counted on humanity's resolve, the same resolve that had carried them through countless battles, through years of struggle and survival. This was their defining moment. This was what would mark them as more than just survivors. The bridge shuddered violently again as another explosion rocked the hull. Zorlan clenched his fists, but his mind stayed steady. The laser plasma displays flickered, but the numbers were now in their favor. The asteroid's course was shifting, slowly but surely, as Earth's missile systems fired in perfect coordination. They had done it. They had broken the enemy's hold on their planet. The screen in front of Zorlan flashed red, signaling the last moments of the alien vessel's life. He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering as the enemy ship's final defenses crumbled. Their leadership was gone, their fleet scattered. The asteroid, now a non-threat, was slowly beginning to veer off course, no longer a deadly certainty. Then there was silence. Not the eerie kind of silence that hung heavy with impending doom, but the silence of a victory hard won. Zorlan could feel it in the air, an unspoken bond between every soldier, every officer. Humanity had triumphed not because they had the most advanced technology, but because they had something more, the indomitable will to fight for their survival no matter the odds. "We did it," Valera said softly, her voice thick with disbelief. Zorlan didn't respond immediately. He let the weight of the moment wash over him. This was their victory. This was humanity's moment to shine, not because they had faced death and survived, but because they had done so by their own will. They had refused to kneel before a superior force, and in the end, it was that refusal that had made all the difference. "We've shown them who we are," Zorlan said, his voice thick with pride. "We're not just another civilization to be ruled. We're humanity, and we will never be conquered." As the final reports of the alien fleet's retreat came through, Zorlan turned back to the window. Earth's surface, once ravaged, now gleamed with hope. The asteroid had been averted, the invaders had been defeated, and humanity had proven to the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. "Let's go home," Zorlan whispered, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 victories. And with that, the ship's engines roared to life once again, carrying them home. But it wasn't just Earth that had been saved. It was the very essence of humanity that had triumphed. The message had been sent, loud and clear. Humanity would never bow.